Origins of bed and breakfast. Initially, bed and breakfast were Victorian-era hotels that were converted to accommodate travelers by opening one's home. These houses became known as bed and breakfast because the owners would give their guests a breakfast before sending them on their way in the morning. Bed and breakfast is a term that is used to refer to any lodging where the host provides breakfast. Nowadays, bed and breakfasts are very popular all around the world for many reasons. They are a great alternative for those who want to travel on a budget because this kind of accommodation is cheaper than staying in hotels or hostels. Furthermore, guests get a chance to experience a different culture firsthand by interacting with locals who live there. It started with a hotel owner in England who had an idea for a home away from home. In the mid-1800s, the wealthy really enjoyed spending their summers at seaside resorts, staying away from their homes for weeks at a time. Before the Industrial Revolution, when people were mostly living in rural areas, bed and breakfasts were more common because it was easier to provide hospitality with small numbers of guests. With the expansion of rural communities and the development of towns, bed and breakfasts became less necessary. The first guest story is about a man looking for a place to stay for the night. He has been walking for hours and is lost and tired. He sees a building with an open door. The sign says bed and breakfast, so he goes into the building without giving it much thought. The man walks in and closes the door behind him. The room is very dark, but he can feel something soft beneath his feet. He walks over to the window to get some light, but when he opens it, all he can see are trees as far as his eyes can see. He takes off his coat and shoes and falls asleep on the bed with only one thought: I'm home. The first guest house to be certified as a historic building was the Penny Lane Guest House in Liverpool, opened in 1845. This is not just a place for guests to rest their head, but also a home for them. The owners go out of their way to ensure that the guests feel at ease and enjoy the experience. The first guest at the inn was Harriet Lowndes, who said she was a violinist. She stayed at the inn for 3 weeks in 1807. Mrs. Willett's B&B. The first guest to stay in a bed and breakfast and the interesting story behind it. The first guest in recorded history was a traveler who stayed at Mrs. Willett's B&B in the early 1900s. He left no name, but Mrs. Willett has many stories of travelers' previous stays. Most guests were young men looking for adventure, but there have been couples, families and even celebrities who've passed through her doors. Mrs. Willett conducted interviews with each guest before they checked out so she could document their experiences at her B&B and tape recorded their conversations with questions like, "What did you like best about your stay?" The history of the bed and breakfast is rooted in England. In 1650, the first documented cases of B&Bs in the Western world were found in England. B&Bs have been used for over 3 centuries around the world. There are many examples of hotels around the world that have been converted into bed and breakfasts. While there is a trend of hotel conversion to bed and breakfasts, it is unlikely that this trend will go away anytime soon. Thank you for watching. See you next time.